Hello, this is Brenda Haug, and welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'll be facilitating today's session. We're glad to have everyone here. A great turnout. This is obviously a topic that is at the forefront of everyone's minds. I'll tell you a little bit about the software that we're using for today's meeting. We're using ReadyTalk, and this slide explains some of the things you can do in here. You should have a chat window in the lower left, and that's a good place if you have technical questions, but also if you have questions that you would like to pose to me or to the presenters, that's a great place to put those. By default, all lines are muted except for the people who are on the line as a presenter, so the audio line is muted. If you do lose your internet connectivity or connection today, if for some reason your machine locks up, you can just close out and then reconnect again using the link that was in your email. And if you are joining us on the phone today, you'll also need to redial the phone number to join. And there's a number there for ReadyTalk support too. If you have a problem that doesn't get fixed by either of those things, you can use that phone number to get assistance. I'll leave that up just for a minute in case you wanted to jot it down. Okay, great. I did want to also give you a heads up that today's meeting is being recorded, and it will be available on the TechSoup website, and there are past presentations there too. We always record and make available these presentations. After today's session, I'll send out an email that will have a link to the presentation, to all the materials that we use today, and then also any of the links or resources that we talk about. So don't worry about needing to jot websites down. We will be sending all of those out in a follow-up email. And then after the webinar, this is a big topic and a short amount of time to get started with our discussion, but we can continue the discussion in the community forum, which is part of the TechSoup website. And in that follow-up email I sent to each of you, I will include a link to get to that community forum. There's also a Twitter hashtag on the slide if you want to, if you're tweeting today's presentation. Okay, so now that we have that housekeeping taken care of, today's topic is eReaders for everyone and teaching tips from trainers. So we'll be really focusing on it from a trainer perspective and thinking about helping people learn to use their eReaders. As I said, I'm Brenda Haug, and I'll be the facilitator today for TechSoup, and then I have a couple of special guests with me today. Amber Slavin, who is with us from the King County Library System. She has worked in libraries for almost 15 years. She coordinated public computer instruction for King County System, and she's currently in adult services at King County's busiest location, the Bellevue Library. And I saw on the King County website that last year, 2011, ebook use at King County's library system increased by 355%. So just massive use and a massive increase. And then our second presenter, second special guest today is Diana Weaver. She is the director of the Basler, Kansas Community Library, which is a library that serves 10,000 people. And Diana has been really recognized for her innovative approaches to providing e-content and providing e-reader learning to her community. So Amber, do you want to go ahead and say hello?
Hi everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to talk about this.
And Diana?
Hi everybody. Thanks Brenda for inviting me here.
Okay, so again, so glad to have both of them here to share their expertise. Today's agenda, I'm going to tell you a little bit about TechSoup, a little bit about TechSoup for libraries, a little bit about this webinar is actually the first in what will be a series of webinars, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that, and then we'll jump right into some e-reader training examples and tips, and then we'll have lots of time at the end for questions and answers too. So throughout, if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the text chat, and we'll be gathering those as we go, and then we'll be sure to address them at the end. So TechSoup is an organization that may be familiar to some of you. It's a nonprofit that provides other nonprofits and libraries with technology that empowers them to serve their communities, so products and information. And then TechSoup for Libraries is a special place for content that's about and especially relevant for libraries. And again, don't worry about jotting down emails at this or web addresses at this point. I will be sending out that follow-up email, and these things are in there. And I have one more group to tell you about, and that I mentioned that this webinar is actually the first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing. They'll be scheduled over the next several months, and they're all connected to benchmarks that are being developed by the EDGE Initiative. The EDGE Initiative is a coalition of library and government organizations, and it includes TechSoup, it includes WebJunction, PLA, some state libraries, the Gates Foundation. So this coalition is developing benchmarks that will help libraries evaluate and continually improve their technology services. And there are 14 benchmarks. They're currently in beta, so still getting feedback and input on them. Of the 14 benchmarks, benchmark 1 is the one that today's webinar falls under, and it is about helping libraries look at the digital literacy in the community and what they do to help increase the level of digital literacy in the community. And e-readers are really just one strand of that. Libraries are doing lots with computer training, with doing other sorts of technology training too, but today we're going to look at this e-reader strand. Okay, so when we think about e-readers and the questions that libraries are getting, the questions that patrons are asking, there are 3 questions on this slide that I think represent the different types of questions libraries get. They really represent different points in the adoption cycle. So which e-reader should I buy, or should I buy an e-reader? How do I get started with this e-reader? So maybe someone receives one as a gift and they aren't quite sure what to do with it. And then how can I get free books? That's definitely a biggie for libraries and a big part of what libraries are focused on in their training efforts too. Lots of different types of training is happening in libraries. There's the one-to-one on the fly training. So just as people come in with a device or have questions, helping them one-to-one. Some libraries are scheduling one-to-one training, so time to sit down with someone. A lot of libraries are trying petting zoos, where they purchase some devices, maybe an example of a Nook, a Kindle, different devices, and then they give patrons a chance to actually try those and hold them, see what they're like. There are training sessions, more formal training sessions using the library's e-readers, and then also training sessions. Libraries are doing training sessions where people are encouraged to bring their own e-readers, and then the training session revolves around helping people learn to use their own e-reader. Lots of libraries are putting resources on their websites. Lots of libraries are also printing out paper handouts related to e-readers and e-books. I've seen e-reader user groups. So people from the community who want to get together and talk about e-readers can do that. And then I've also seen guest speakers used. So that might be someone from Best Buy, someone from Barnes & Noble, or volunteers or others from the community. So guest speakers doing some training too. Okay, so I think what we'll do first, so lots of possibilities, and I just pulled them all together on this slide and thought that I would turn to Amber and Diana and give them a chance to talk about what their library is doing, what they've been doing with e-reader training from all of these different possibilities. Amber, I think I'll go ahead and start with you first. Can you talk about the types of assistance your library is offering related to e-readers?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I would say that our e-reader assistance kind of falls into 3 categories. So we do, specifically at the Bellevue Library, a lot of over-the-phone assistance with patrons. People can call the phone number that's on the back of their library card for any sort of question, and it comes to the reference department here at Bellevue, and we get, probably just dozens and dozens of e-reader questions a day. So we offer a lot of phone assistance for people who are trying to download a book, or maybe they just have questions about e-readers, but usually it's that they already have a device and they're trying to figure out how to use Overdrive and download books from us. We also do in-person demos. So the demonstrations are often just drop-in demos with an e-reader kit that several of the libraries have in this system. There are probably 6 or 7 devices in each kit, kind of varying e-readers and a little laptop. And we just set up at a little kiosk or a table either in the library or out in the community at various places, which I'll probably talk about outreach more later. But we do just sort of, as people come in and are interested in what we have, kind of help that way. People will also bring their own e-readers to those demonstrations and ask questions. Sometimes we have a little bit more structured classes where people show up for a set amount of time and we go through the hows and whys of our digital downloads collection. But I would say the thing that we do the most is the drop-in demonstrations. And then we also have 30-minute book-a-librarian appointments for various research topics and job application help and all of that sort of stuff. But definitely a ton of people make those appointments for help with their e-reader. So they usually come in, already have an e-reader, are stuck after getting the Adobe ID or downloading an Overdrive app or just whatever. But we have those 30-minute sessions for people too. So that's primarily what we do.
Okay, that's great, Amber. I can show your website or your web page that you've put together too.
Oh yeah, I would definitely like to talk about that. So this is our e-reader guide for the public. It's tabbed by device. Within each tab is directions for downloading books from our collection, and also each tab has tons of, at least 2 or 3 videos kind of walking people through the process. So whether you're someone who likes to watch someone else do it via video or read the directions, there's kind of both of those available for you. And then our 800 number that goes to the reference department is posted on each one of those tabs. This also is really valuable for staff training because everything that a staff person could do is also available here, because with ebooks there's not a ton that we can do on the back end. So it's kind of, we need to know how the public experiences these devices. So these guides are really great for staff training too.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amber. And I'm going to ask Diana the same question. Just what types of assistance is your library offering?
Well, we also have a contract with Overdrive because that became really apparent when we did a focus group last fall about how our patrons interacted with their e-readers and what they expected or what they wanted the library to do for them. So one of the things that came out of the focus group was that they wanted to be able to access content through us. So we do have a contract with Overdrive as well. One of the things that we did is right after Christmas we had kind of an open house that we called "What Did You Get for Christmas?" and we just let people bring in whatever they got for Christmas. The Kindle was big. The Kindle Fire was really big at that time. But we had several different versions of the Kindle in that class, and I think that's one of the challenges for library staff is that there are so many different versions of each of these devices. The devices are all different, and each time one of the Amazon or Barnes & Noble comes out with a new device, and that's a new challenge for us and also for patrons. So we do that, and we also have on our website some different resources for people. We've also done a petting zoo. We've gone out to the community with different devices and let people look at them and try them out, and that's been pretty popular. So we can talk about the website now, or we can talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so what we have on our website here is that we talk about, first of all, our focus group that we did, and we invited people who were part of our winter reading group two years ago to try out a bunch of different devices that we'd purchased, and then we had them evaluate them not just on the ease of use, but how to download items and what it was like to read on them. And so we posted their evaluations here and on a blog, and it was really interesting to see the different, how the different devices, how people like them. Some people like to read in bed, so they like the one device better than the device that you can read in the sunlight. So that was a really interesting thing, and I think patrons have looked through that a lot when they're thinking about what kind of device they want. First thing is, what do you want to use the device for? We also have a link up there for free books that links to websites that offer free ebooks in case we are a community that we have a lot of rural areas, and where our contract with Overdrive says that we can only allow people within our service district to check out books from our e-library. So we put those free ebook sites up there for people who didn't have access to our collection. And then we have instructions on the website. We also have handouts for people who want to download from our Overdrive collection. So, and we're also checking out e-readers. We decided, since these devices were a year old, which means they're ancient in technology age, we decided we'd go ahead and check them out to people. So we check them out just like we do our audio CDs for 2 weeks. And at the price they are, they're not too much more expensive than audio CDs, so we don't feel like that we're really risking all that much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Diana. Okay, so we are getting a lot of good questions in text chat, and again, we'll address those at the end. And then people are also sharing some resources, which is great too, and I'm collecting those. So those will go out in that follow-up communication that we do. So we'll be able to see, not only in that follow-up email, I'll share Amber's King County information, and I'll also share Diana's Baser information, but we'll include things that are a lot of these great resources that people are sharing with us in the webinar and in the chat too. One of the things that I think is a particular challenge or question when you think about training and you think about e-readers is, how do you keep up? How do you know all you need to know? The devices keep changing, more are available all the time. How do you keep up with all of that? How do you deal with that change? This slide, I put the quote in here, I've never seen that device before, but here, let me help you use it. I'm sure that's something that both you, Amber, and you, Diana, have had to deal with in helping the public. So, Amber, maybe I'll turn to you again and ask you, just how do you deal with that, helping people with something that maybe you don't have direct hands-on experience with yourself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that happens to me all the time. And even something that I've used before, it's so easy to forget the details of each device. So the web guide that I showed that was on the slide earlier, that was created by staff here, I use all the time. Whenever I'm helping someone on the phone, I usually just automatically go there because, you know, I worry that there might be something I forget. I watch tons of videos on how to use the different devices, not just the ones that are embedded on our website, but just, you know, going to YouTube and doing a search for devices. That's one way that I kind of keep up. And often, you know, I'm surprised a lot by problems that people have that I've never heard of, because I've heard of a lot of issues with downloading books to an e-reader. So I often just end up Googling the language that they share with me or the error message that they're getting at home and try to find help that way on various forums. So I just try really hard not to think that I need to know everything about what people are asking about, because the minute I feel like I should know, I kind of get myself a little anxious and freaked out. So I just try to pace myself when I'm helping people and explain that, you know, I'm learning this too, even though I use them often and have one of my own and I'm pretty tech savvy. It's just impossible to remember all of this. And then the kit that we have here at our library with those readers that I mentioned, I just take it out once a month and kind of look at the readers and try to do various things with them and just practice actually holding them, downloading things to them, trying to remember the menus and things like that. And I know that not every library or library system can have a kit like that. We're really lucky. So I would recommend going to stores, Target or wherever, Best Buy, and looking at the e-readers and playing with them there too. And if you have a smartphone, putting the app on your phone and playing with it, that sort of thing. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks, Amber. And
sure.
Diana, how do you handle that? Seeing and being asked to assist with devices you maybe haven't seen before?
Well, I think you have to be honest with the people and say, you know what, I've never seen this before. I don't know. I really don't have a device like this, but you know what? We can find the answer for you. And I think that's what libraries do. We can't really know everything there is to know about all these devices and about technology, but we can help people find the resources. And I will say that I found that Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Kobo, those websites have a lot invested in making their devices easy to use, and so they've done a pretty good job, especially Amazon and Barnes & Noble, about having some pretty good help screens, having some pretty good help videos. And I use ehow.com, I use YouTube and Google, of course, but I also try to check those websites too, because they usually have some pretty good videos and how-tos on there. And then I have found a blog that I think Brenda will share the link to, that someone, he's just an amazing guy. He I don't know that he gets paid for it, but he has ads on his website. But if you ignore them, he's got some really good help for that, and we can share that blog post with you. But I just say, this is all new for us too, and it changes, and let's go on a journey together. So that's basically what I do.
One piece of advice that you shared with me, Diana, or a tip that I thought was really good, is just thinking about e-readers and just talking about them a lot. And you said you're always asking people, when you see them in the library, for example, you're asking them about their devices or how they like them. Can you talk a little bit about this, about the importance for talking to people about e-readers and how you learn a lot that way?
Well, sure. The first thing I'd say about that is that when someone puts a device in my face and says, well, how do I use it, it's a good question to say, well, how do you like your e-reader? That gives me a second to kind of look at the device and go, okay, what device is this? Where's the settings? Where's the home button? But beyond that, it's a very good question, and it gets them talking about what it is they're actually looking for and what it is they're actually having trouble with. And I think it's fascinating to hear people talk about how they're using these devices to read, because I think that's one of the things that, that's what it means to libraries, is that this isn't just technology that was invented to drive us crazy. It's about reading, and it's fun to talk to people about their reading experience on these devices. And so that's really how we got started, was that we decided to do a focus group, and like I said, we asked some people that we knew were really good readers to go on to try these things out with us. And that really kind of showed us what it was that people wanted to know about the devices. And I don't feel like that I'm in the position to sell devices. When someone says, well, what should I buy? I don't feel like that's really my, I wouldn't tell them what kind of washing machine to buy. But I can give them sources, and I can also give them experiences of people around here. And one of the things that we did is that we took all those recommendations and the experiences of our readers, and we posted them right before Christmas so that people who were thinking about buying them could look at those and use them as kind of a guide.
How about you, Amber? Do you find yourself having a lot of conversations about e-readers too?
Yeah, absolutely. In person at the reference desk, when I'm out on we have some small bookmobiles that go out into the community, over the phone, so much. I mean, I probably have 2 or 3 hours of phone reference shifts a day, and I talk to people a lot about eReaders that way. And that's been a really neat learning experience because you kind of have to think about talking about them a little differently because the person's not in front of you, their device isn't in front of you. Yeah, so I definitely talk to people about them. When I see someone using one, you know, I might ask them what they use or that sort of thing. So I do find that it's really helpful to talk about it, and it definitely keeps me on my toes too.
Another tip that you shared and that I think is just important for all types of training that we do, technology training, is that it's all about just helping people get to the next level, helping people, empowering them to do what it is that they want to do with technology. And so I have on the slide a picture of someone fishing, the whole teaching them to fish rather than giving them a fish. And Diana, do you want to talk a little bit about how this comes up in your training that you do for people related to e-readers?
Well, I just feel like that as librarians we want to be able to guide people to resources, but that we don't always have to feel like we know everything about every device. And I think it comes with the territory that when you purchase one of these devices that you have a little bit of responsibility yourself to learn how to use it, which is part of the adventure of it. And I think when we have people who come in with their devices, we find that there are people who have a real wide variance of comfort with technology. We have people who really get it, who know how to create accounts for themselves, who know that you have to have a credit card attached to an account. And then we have people who really struggle, who maybe have been given this device for Christmas by their kids and they have no idea how to use a computer. That's an actual true story. And so one of the things that we have to do is help them decide for themselves, you know, what comfort they are and what it is that they want to do, and to encourage them to learn on their own. And a lot of time that's part of the adventure and that's part of the fun. And, you know, ask your kids, ask your grandchildren, ask your neighbors. You know, it's not just us that bears the responsibility of teaching this. This is part of the whole learning of having these devices, is learning how to use them. And it you know, is a great experience for people to learn how to use this technology.
Amber, anything you'd like to add about this as part of a training philosophy or approach?
Yeah, and one quick story. I've definitely encountered a few people who've received e-readers as gifts or bought them for themselves, do not have a computer, and then they've purchased one that requires you plugging the reader into a computer with a USB to transfer books, which you can't do using our public access computers at the library because of the restrictions on the computers. So they buy an e-reader or get one thinking they can put books on their reader from our library, and they can't. So situations like that are kind of sad because they have this device that maybe they feel stuck with and they don't have a way to get content on it. So I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to help people in those situations, but it is sort of an interesting interaction. For training, I definitely try to be really hands-on with people and have them actually do the steps themselves. So sometimes it would be a lot faster for me to just take the e-reader and show them by doing, but I just feel like it's infinitely more, just more helpful for them to actually go through the steps themselves. That way they kind of get a little bit more of the experience and see where to push the buttons and what they need to do. And that can sometimes be a little frustrating just because it does take a while, or maybe they accidentally hit the wrong button and you have to start over again. But I do think there's a lot of value in having people actually, you know, kind of like Diana was saying, you know, have the responsibility for their device and sort of figure it out for themselves. So that's it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Amber, and I think that's part of the digital literacy is that, you know, we're in the literacy business in a lot of ways, and this is definitely digital literacy, and if we just do that for them, we're not really teaching them anything. So I think that's all part of that works in with our goals. We're not just selling a product, but we are teaching people digital literacy, and that's very important in our society, as we all know.
Yeah.
Well, one last question that I'll throw out at you before we move on to the question and answer part with our participant questions. So I have up on the slide here just some information from a Pew report, and again, that report, a link to that will be in the resources that we send out after. But it said that 48% of people who own an e-reader don't know if their library lends ebooks, so they aren't even thinking of the library as a place for ebooks. A pretty big percentage of those e-reader owners. So I wanted to throw out, how do you let people know that you are happy to help them learn to use their e-reader? How do you promote that or get the word out about that? And Amber, I'll throw that one at you first.
Sure. I definitely see this as a real problem for us. And we do advertise in sort of all the typical ways, flyers, word of mouth, referrals, social media, talking about the resources that we have on Twitter or Facebook or however we want to share that information. So we do those things, but the thing I think is really valuable is just building partnerships with outside organizations and going out into the community and talking about our digital downloads and our ebook collection. So we've had a real initiative in this system for librarians to get outside of the building and do work in the community. So, several staff have gone to farmers markets or senior centers, community centers, churches, whatever, just kind of set up a time to bring our kit to various organizations out in the community or groups like book clubs and just talk about the resources and talk about how you use our collection with e-readers or just on your computer or on your phone or whatever. And I just think that's really valuable because we're capturing people who maybe aren't even coming to the library at all, or they come to the library for a very specific thing and don't think about what else we have to offer. So I think that outreach is kind of the thing to communicate about these resources.
Okay, great. Those are great examples. Yeah, I love that farmer's market example. That's
yeah, it's
great.
Fun to staff that too.
Uh-huh, I bet. Okay, well, we have reached the end of the part of this session, which was really interviewing Diana and Amber, and now we're going to turn to some of the questions that you all have been posing to us. So thanks to people who have been sharing those in the text chat, and I think that I will just go ahead and start looking through some of those. We'll address the ones we can get to here today, and then also I think Stephanie has just shared the address for the community forum too. So be sure, if you want to continue the conversation, if you have more resources to share or stories to share, be sure to join us in that community forum too. Okay, so one of the questions I saw I think you both have petting zoos, and so someone is asking, did the library buy the devices for those petting zoos, or were they donated, or did you have vendors give them to you? And maybe I'll have Diana answer that one first.
We purchased those. The library board decided about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I guess it was now, that they wanted to be able to research this need and be able to provide this for our community, and so they set aside some money, and the devices were purchased and are owned by the library. So that's how we got ours.
And Amber, how did you get your devices?
So we purchased kits for various, we call them clusters in the system. So there's 47 libraries in the King County Library System, and we have about 11 or 12 kits that are kind of housed geographically for libraries to share with each other. So that was bought; those were purchased by the system. I know that some busier libraries or libraries with really active friends groups chose to purchase even more to add to those kits, but mostly they were bought by the library system.
Kind of a related question that was posed is, if a library wants to purchase a few devices for staff and patron training, Are there any that you would recommend?
Well, definitely the Kindle, because that seems to be the most popular and the best marketed. And so we have 2 different versions of the Kindle, and we don't have a Kindle Fire yet, but we might get one if we can talk our friends into buying one. The Nooks are very popular, and we do have an iPad that we have. It's the first generation, so it's antique now, but and we also bought a Kobo, and we bought the Sony because the Sony e-readers work really well with the Overdrive system. So those are the ones that we purchased. And I don't know but what all Amber has.
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones I would recommend too. We definitely have iPads in our kit, and that's really nice. But you can kind of replicate how an iPad works with an iPod Touch, which is, probably several $100s cheaper. And so that's kind of a nice alternative too. And it sort of opens up the playing field a little bit because, you might not encounter a lot of patrons who want to buy an iPad or have an iPad, but maybe they have an iPod, and you can show them how they can look or listen to books on that. So I think it's nice to kind of have a diversity of devices, definitely Kindles, Nooks, devices that work on the Android operating system, like the Samsung Galaxy tablet it's not too expensive. I mean, I think it's like $200, which is certainly a lot of money. But those are the ones that I think are important, and iPods for sure.
Great. Another related question is, with that kind of petting zoo where you are purchasing those different devices, I know, for example, with my Nook that it's associated with my credit card. How do you handle needing to register devices, assigning credit cards, that kind of thing? Diana.
What I did was I went to Walmart and I bought a $25 credit card, a Visa card, and I attached that to the different accounts. And yes, that's a pretty big deal. So, if someone should get a hold of it, they can't charge any more than $25. And then when we did our focus group and we allowed our patrons to download items that they wanted to put on the devices, we bought gift cards for from Amazon and from Barnes & Noble and so on, so that they could practice on how to download things. But yeah, that's a sticking point for a lot of people, that they don't want to attach their credit card. And in fact, when we check out eReaders, we have an agreement that says that if they put their credit card on one of our devices, we're not responsible for it.
Amber, same question to you.
Yeah, and I can't really speak to the credit card piece of that because the kits were purchased centrally. I do know that each kit has a pretty involved spreadsheet regarding what Adobe ID to use with what device and what email address is associated with the Amazon account that goes with a certain device. So, I mean, I think because there is some issues with you can only authorize devices, I think it's 5 or 6 devices with one Adobe ID that you have to create to use Overdrive, which I noticed someone had asked about what is Overdrive, and that's kind of the vendor, kind of one of the only players in the field that provide e-content to libraries to check out. So to use Overdrive, you need to have an Adobe ID, and that Adobe ID can only be associated with so many devices. So I think it's just kind of a lot of organizing before you actually put them out into the public, and making sure you have and library card numbers and PIN numbers and things like that too. So it's just sort of important to get all that straight before you let people start using them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amber. Another question a few people have asked about this: are either of your libraries preloading devices with some titles and then making those available for checkout? Is that something that you're doing, Amber?
Checking out actual e-readers?
Yeah, with books preloaded on them.
No, I mean in the pilot stages before when ebooks were kind of just becoming a thing, there was a committee that talked about that, but it just was impossible. I mean, it wouldn't be worth it because we wouldn't be able to provide enough e-readers for people to check out. I mean, there are so many, just so many patrons in this county because it's such a large county with so many libraries that we don't do that.
Okay. And then, Diana, that is something that you are doing in Baser.
Yeah, that's one nice thing about being a small library is that you can do certain things like that. We did the devices that we bought for our initial pilot program. We've decided to go ahead and check out to people recently. We loaded like the Hunger Games on it, the Hunger Games trilogy, the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, and the Game of Thrones 4-book series on some of those. You've got to, if you're going to do that, you have to purchase the Kindle version. You've got to purchase the Barnes & Noble version. So we did a lot of duplicating of some of those things. But it's one way that people who have never tried an e-reader, who are 150 on the holds list for the Hunger Games, it was fun to be able to say, you know what, you're on the hold list for this, but we have this Kindle e-reader that has them all loaded on. Would you like to try to see what it's like on a Kindle e-reader? And that was a lot of fun for people and a lot of good PR for us as well. So, and again, that's kind of a whole managing nightmare, in a way, managing challenge anyway, that you have to, so like the Kindles, you want to deauthorize before you check them out, so that because Amazon makes it really, really easy to buy things, and so if you deauthorize an account, then there's no chance of anybody buying something accidentally. So there's just different. It takes a while to learn all those things. So, but we went ahead and started that about a month ago, and it's been really popular.
Okay. Another question I see is you both have mentioned that it's possible to book time with a librarian, as that's one of the training approaches that you've tried. Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of that? How does someone actually book time with a librarian? Amber, I'll have you answer that first, please.
Yeah, we have one phone number that people can call to book an appointment. I suppose they could do it in person too, but we sort of try to direct them to one staff person who coordinates that program at our library. And his name is Zach. When he calls people who want an appointment or speaks to them on the phone, he just sort of tries to get an idea of what they're working on and what their issue is, and if it's about an e-reader, what kind of device they have. So he sort of preps that appointment before the person actually shows up. It's advertised online. The service is advertised online and then also in flyers in the library. And we have a staff preferences spreadsheet where there are different subject areas, e-readers, job searching, whatever, and staff have kind of indicated what they prefer to work on. So when Zach books an appointment, he tries to honor that, but I think also there's sort of a push for people to try things that maybe they aren't as comfortable with, including helping patrons with e-readers. The appointments are 30 minutes long, but we do save a little bit of cushion for them to run over if they do. So that's how it works.
That's great, Amber. I'm glad to hear all that because we're just starting that kind of program. We have done a lot of drop-in technology classes. We do a lot of one-on-one at our help desk, and we've decided to try to do a book a librarian to kind of help manage that. But and we've also started doing drop-in tech classes on Wednesday evenings, so people can just drop in and help, just tell us what they want help with. So I'm really interested, and thank you for sharing that. I really don't have that much to add to it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you.
Another question we were asked is, someone says that she has been offering e-reader classes on a regular basis because patrons keep asking for them, but she's not actually getting good attendance at those events. And so we talked a little bit about promotion and outreach, but do you have any suggestions on help with that?
No, I think that's been my experience too. Right after Christmas, we had really good attendance, and then each time we did it after that, it kind of dropped off and dropped off. So I think, you know, until Amazon comes up with a new product, and then they'll probably all come back with new devices. So I think, like I said, part of it is that there are people out there who are real savvy, and they just want to sit down and they can use these devices. And then you have people that come in and don't have have any idea how to use them or about setting up accounts or anything. So I think it's just kind of hit and miss. But that's one reason why I do like the idea of Book a Librarian, because that way you can make sure that you're covering that, and whereas having a class, people may not come in at a certain time.
Yeah, and that's what I would add too, is that doing the Book a Librarian, the one-on-one appointments with people is a great way to kind of work in tandem with classes or drop-in demonstrations. Because sometimes we get a lot of people who show up for the demos, and then sometimes we don't. So the one-on-one appointments, and then definitely kind of having those partnerships with people where they organize an audience for you and then you go to them seems to work really well too. So.
Amber, lots of people seem to like your website, your guide to e-readers and e-books. Is that something that's okay for people to link to from their own library website?
Yeah, I mean that seems appropriate to me. I certainly don't have ownership over that guide, but I'm sure if you linked to it and indicated where it came from, that would be totally fine.
Okay, here's an interesting question from someone who says that their IT department in their library, the policy is that they are not allowed to touch a patron's device. It doesn't sound like that's a policy you share, but do you have a policy on whether or not, or to what extent you can touch and work with a patron's device? Maybe Amber, I'll start with you on that one too.
That's a really interesting question that I'm going to look into, because we used to be really, really strict about not touching people's laptops. People bring in their laptops and they say, I can't connect to the wireless, or help me do this, or whatever. And we're pretty stringent about not touching their laptops still today. But we touch people's e-readers all the time. So I don't know. I think that's something that, one way to alleviate that issue is to, again, have them walk through the steps themselves. So I think that is what I usually do, but I do end up kind of holding or pushing buttons on other people's e-readers, and I'm not sure how appropriate that is, so I guess I can't really answer.
We're struggling with that right now as well, because my tech guy pointed out the other day that we have that policy as well, and so I'm working on a new policy to present to the board this month that kind of maybe softens that language a little bit. But I will say it's really frustrating. Sometimes you want the patrons to be able to do themselves with on their own devices, but touch screens are really tough for some people to get a hang of, and I've stood for long minutes while someone uses their touch screen and accidentally, as they're expanding the screen, they touch a link to somewhere else, and we have to wait for that link to load so that we can cancel out and come back. So it's very frustrating. It takes a lot of patience. That is one of the challenges. But if at all possible, we try to let them do it, and then that way they learn and we can't really mess their machine up for them. Although I really don't think that there's much of a way that we can really break the machine. I'm not really worried about that when I take someone's device from them. I think that they trust me enough to be, they're there with me asking me questions, and I think it's just the trust there is implied, and I'm not really worried about it.
Okay, great. Another question that I'm seeing is about the rest of the staff. So you two have talked about all the things you've done to keep up and how you approach all of this, but do you feel like the rest of your staff is on board with being willing to help people with e-readers and the questions that they have? And how do you create that culture of learning and helping people with their technology? Start with you on that one, Diana.
Well, one of the things that, and it is a challenge because I don't want to ask my staff to take stuff home over the weekend and learn a device, and they're pretty busy when they're here. So one of the things that I did was that I encouraged them to, when it came time for their vacations, to say, I said, you know, why don't you take an e-reader with you if you want to? Let's load it up with some books you really want to take, and I'll show you how to do that. And so I made it kind of where it was something that they wanted to do, and they're all real interested in helping people, and there is a culture of learning here, I think, and I'm really glad about that. And we did ask some of them to be part of the focus group, and I listen a lot, and when I hear one of the staff struggling, I'll go out and I'll kind of help them out with some of the answers, and it is a challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think it's challenging too, and just like with anything, you know, there are varying levels of comfort among the staff. So some people are definitely into it and willing to try to learn, and some people are really scared or anxious about it or annoyed that they get asked about it so much. So I think, you know, just encouraging people to play when they can, and you know, letting them know that they don't have to know everything really helps. We definitely had some group staff trainings with the kits when they first arrived, and the training department at first just sort of had it be an open-ended training where it was sort of like a staff petting zoo. And for people who were feeling anxious about the e-readers, that really did not work for them, that sort of time to explore. So the training department then kind of created some step-by-step quick exercises for each device. You know, find the on button, look for this option, click here, do this. And that sort of, from what I saw, made people who were anxious a lot more comfortable with sort of walking through the steps. Because if you give someone a device that they've never seen before and tell them to just sit and play with it, that's kind of setting up a scenario where they might get really bored quickly or frustrated or whatever. So I think it kind of honors a learning style that involves sort of wanting to walk through steps and be a little more guided. And then for people who want to explore, they can explore. So I think that those things are helpful.
I think that's right, and I think that's important to keep in mind that everybody has different learning styles, and you want to do the best that you can, but also, you know, to encourage them that, you know, you don't have to know everything about it. You aren't going to know everything about it. Be sure and ask for help from other staff members or whatever, because it's a culture of we're all learning this together, patrons and staff together. So it's important to encourage them to feel like it's okay not to know.
Great. Another question. Did you survey your community about e-readers and ebooks before offering them? And then I would also throw out, on an ongoing basis, are you doing any sorts of surveys or focus groups? Maybe Diana, I'll have you start with that one.
We did do a survey before we started with our focus group. And we found that we were a little bit higher than the national average that came out in the Pew report. So that really spurred us on to do some other things. And then we have, just did a yearly survey, and we asked people about the e-reader usage had increased. So yeah, we have surveyed people. And we will keep asking people and keep surveying and to see if we can recognize the trends.
How about at King County, Amber?
Well, you know, that's tricky because I do think that surveys are happening or ways to kind of get feedback are happening, but more on a system-wide level. At my location specifically, we're not doing anything formal. We don't have surveys or anything like that. But, you know, anecdotally, we definitely are hearing feedback from people and kind of talking amongst ourselves about what we're helping people with. That web guide that I shared earlier is maintained by some of the answer line staff here at the library. So I think there's a lot of conversations that happen at this location, but no formal surveys or anything like that. Not right now anyway.
Okay. Well, I think we're reaching the end of our time together today. This has been great. Lots of really good questions, and I'm so appreciative, Diana and Amber, for the time you've taken to share with us your experiences and your tips. I think it would be great if we can continue this discussion in the community forum. I know there are some questions we didn't get to. There are a lot of resources that were talked about today, and we'll share those with you in the follow-up email, so you'll have a chance to take a look at those. I also want to thank William and Travis and Sarah and Stephanie, who have been helping out in the text chat. We've had lots of questions and things being shared there, and they've been helping us keep track of those so that I can include things in the follow-up email and that we can follow up on any questions that we didn't get a chance to respond to here. I do want to tell you again that this is the first webinar in what will be a series of webinars based on the EDGE Initiative benchmarks. This time we were focusing on digital literacy and that specific strand, eReaders, and how you help your community develop digital literacy with eReaders. Next time we're going to be talking about the second benchmark, which is about digital content and helping people create digital content. And we'll have a guest speaker for that session again, and that's Donna from the Escondido Library in California, and she'll be talking about Library U and her experiences with that project. And it's a really neat project, and I look forward to having a chance to hear more about it myself and to hear your questions and to talk with Donna about that. I also want to thank ReadyTalk, our sponsor for today and the provider of this tool that we've been using to interact with one another. So again, this is our first benchmark webinar, and I think it was a great success in large part to the great questions and to our great presenters. So thank you again, everyone, for being here, and special thanks to Diana and to Amber for sharing your expertise. This has been great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I'm not sure if you plan to share our email addresses, but I feel perfectly comfortable talking to people over email about any other things.
I do too.
Great.
That would be great. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Watch for an email from me, and we hope to see you again next month at our next webinar. Thank you, and bye-bye.